pride never slams the door. It closes it quietly, convinced that walking away is strength. That's how David left. Not with anger, not even with cruelty. Just the cold assurance of a man who believed he deserved more. More than this small town. More than the quiet rhythm of life with a woman like Emily. She didn't beg him to stay. That was the part that haunted him later. She simply stood there, wrapped in her red scarf, eyes steady, shoulders still, as if she had been preparing for that moment long before it arrived. She didn't cry. Not in front of him. And maybe that's what cut the deepest. Emily knew the kind of man David was. Ambitious, restless, addicted to the idea of greatness. And for a while, she tried to fit into that picture. Tried to believe love would be enough to anchor him. But some men don't recognize what they have until they're standing in silence, with nothing left to prove. Years passed. Christmases came and went. The town changed in small ways. New lights, a few new faces. But Emily, she didn't just stay. She grew. She became someone new, someone unshakable. Not because she avoided pain, but because she walked through it. And David, he got what he wanted, or so he thought. The high-rise offices, the applause, the attention. But pride is a poor companion in the dark. It whispers lies until the world stops listening. And when it all collapsed, he realized the only thing he truly missed was the one person who never asked him to be more. This Christmas, he comes back, not to fix things, not to reclaim what he lost, but because he's finally ready to face what he ran from. And maybe, just maybe, become a man worthy of forgiveness. But Emily doesn't open the door just because it's snowing. She's not the girl he left. She's the woman who learned to live without him. And if he's hoping for mercy this Christmas, he'll have to earn it. Step by step, word by word, with no guarantees. Stay with us through this entire story, because what happens when the proud return humbled is not always a reunion. Sometimes it's a rebirth. Subscribe now for more stories like this, where second chances are not given, they're lived. It started on a Tuesday evening, the kind of night when winter wrapped around the town like a memory you couldn't shake. The Christmas lights on Main Street blinked slowly, casting soft reflections in puddles of melted snow. Emily lit a candle on the windowsill, not out of routine but for warmth she could no longer find in the room. Behind her, David was packing with clinical precision, folding shirts as if they were charts in a boardroom. There were no raised voices, just distance, vast and cold. He didn't look at her when he said he couldn't stay. "I need more," he said, zipping up a suitcase that had never seen snow. She heard the words, but they echoed like a distant carol, one she didn't recognize anymore. Emily stood still, arms at her sides, not because she didn't care, but because she cared enough to not interfere with someone walking away. She had learned long ago that you can't chase someone whose eyes are fixed on the door. You can only let them go without losing yourself. And in that moment, she chose not to beg. David paced as if the room was too small for the future he believed he deserved. He spoke of opportunities, cities with lights that didn't flicker, people who saw his potential in numbers and strategies, not roots and rhythms. "You understand, don't you?" he asked, finally turning to her. Emily looked at him, and for a second he saw something that startled him. Not pain, not anger, but peace. She didn't understand, but she no longer needed to. "What we have is good," he added. "But I don't want to wake up 10 years from now wondering what I missed." Her silence wasn't agreement. It was mourning, not of him, but of the version of her that once waited at windows. She had spent too many nights believing that love meant staying small so someone else could grow. Tonight, she refused to shrink again. So she nodded. Not because she approved, but because she accepted reality. He hesitated, waiting for a reaction, a plea, maybe even a tear. But all she gave him was stillness. She walked past him, picked up his scarf, and placed it gently on top of his suitcase. "There," she said softly. That word carried everything: finality, tenderness, goodbye. He couldn't meet her eyes. That was the first sign of his own doubt. The snow began to fall harder outside, coating the porch in quiet white. He looked out the window, then back at her. "Maybe someday I'll come back," he said, like a man offering hope without commitment. Emily didn't answer. She simply turned off the candle. Light wasn't needed for what came next. He left just after midnight. No hug. No dramatic final glance. Just the soft click of the door and the echo of boots in fresh snow. She stood there for a long time, not because she couldn't move, but because she refused to rush through a moment that needed to hurt. Healing starts with honesty. Emily didn't cry until 2 nights later. It was the sound of the wind through the pine trees that undid her, not the absence of his voice. She sat by the fireplace with a mug of untouched tea and let herself feel what most people tried to escape. She didn't curse him. She didn't curse herself. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you," not because she was grateful for the pain, but because the silence left in his wake revealed something sacred. She still had herself. Her worth wasn't tied to someone else's arrival or exit, and for the first time in years she could feel her own heartbeat. Steady, whole. The town noticed his absence, but no one asked questions. Small towns are good at pretending they don't see the ache in a woman's tightened smile. Emily carried on, not with bitterness, but with dignity. She showed up. She helped others. She served coffee and comfort. And slowly, the room he left became her sanctuary again. Not haunted, reclaimed. Each day she chose to stay present in a life that no longer included him, to stay rooted in her work, her friendships, her faith, to stay kind even when it would have been easier to close off. It wasn't easy, but it was real, and that kind of staying mattered more than any promise ever could. David, meanwhile, disappeared into noise. Elevators, airports, hotel lobbies with cold air conditioning and colder conversations. He rose fast. Of course he did. He was brilliant, decisive, relentless. But in every victory, he expected something he couldn't name. And when it didn't come, he drowned the silence in applause. But that story is for later. For now, it's important to see this night for what it was. Not just the end of a relationship, but the birth of 2 new people. Emily, becoming more than someone waiting at the door. David, beginning the long journey toward the mirror. One walked away. One stayed. But both would be changed. The Christmas that followed was quiet. Emily decorated the tree by herself, placing ornaments like memories, carefully, with reverence. She baked cookies and donated them to the shelter. She lit a single candle on Christmas Eve, not for what she lost, but for what she was becoming. She didn't know if he would ever come back, but she no longer lived in maybes. She lived in now, and now was full. Not perfect, but whole in its own holy way. And that was more than enough. She still wore the red scarf sometimes, not out of sentiment, but because it was warm, because it reminded her of who she had been and how far she had come. Sometimes healing doesn't look like letting go. Sometimes it looks like holding on differently, with grace. This chapter wasn't written in heartbreak. It was written in choice. David chose ambition. Emily chose integrity. And both choices came at a cost. But only one would find its way back by learning what it meant to stay. And so, beneath a sky scattered with stars and snow in a town wrapped in quiet wonder, Emily breathed deeply. Alone, but not abandoned. Waiting for no one, but open to everything love might someday return, differently. Healing never announces itself loudly. It arrives in the quiet choices you make when no one is watching. And that's exactly how Emily began again, not with a new love, not with revenge, but with steady breaths and quiet mornings. She didn't search for meaning in the wreckage. She built something new on the ground he left empty. Each morning began with ritual. Coffee brewed slowly, a journal opened to blank pages, and the sound of snow melting against the window. There were days the silence felt heavy, but even that heaviness was hers now, and that gave her a strange kind of power. She poured herself into service, volunteering at the church pantry, helping neighbors decorate their porches for Christmas, organizing the winter donation drive. It wasn't about being busy. It was about being useful. Giving became a balm for the places that still ached, and slowly those aches softened. People began to notice, not because she announced her pain, but because she didn't. Her strength was never loud, but it was steady, grounded, unmistakable. The kind of strength that only comes from walking through fire and choosing not to come out bitter, just wiser and warmer. She no longer waited for his call. At first, it was hard not to check, but eventually, the absence of his name stopped echoing through her thoughts. It wasn't that she forgot. She just stopped needing answers he could never give. Some closure doesn't come from conversation. It comes from growing past the question. One evening, as she decorated her tree, she caught her reflection in the window. Not the girl he left, not even the woman who wept, but someone entirely new. There was peace in her eyes, a softness that came from having nothing to prove. She still remembered the sound of the door closing, but now it didn't sting. It simply marked a moment in time, one that shaped her, but didn't define her. She had outgrown the story where she had to be chosen. Now she chose herself. The town carried on with its slow, beautiful rhythm. Christmas songs floated from shop fronts. Children built snowmen on sidewalks, and Emily became a quiet thread in the fabric of the season. She didn't crave the spotlight, but somehow, her presence became light, especially for those who had also been left behind. There were days when memories came rushing back. A laugh they once shared, a look he gave her across the coffee shop table, the way he used to whisper dreams late at night. She let those memories visit, but she didn't let them stay. They no longer had permission to shape her future. One night, sitting under the stars, she whispered aloud, "I'm still here," not in defiance, not in sorrow, but in reverence for the version of her that survived everything she thought would break her. She began writing again, not poetry, not letters, just thoughts. Simple, sacred lines like, "Wholeness is not found in returning. It's found in remaining. I am not unfinished because he left. God doesn't waste pain, he rebuilds with it." The pages filled slowly, then easily. Sometimes strangers would say, "You're so strong." She would smile, but what she really wanted to say was, "I'm not strong, I'm healed in pieces." And I let them show. But most people weren't ready to hear that kind of truth. So she just smiled and kept walking. She didn't close her heart to love. She just stopped chasing the version of it that left her behind. If love came again, it would need to arrive with gentleness, with presence, and with humility. Because she had learned, real love doesn't need to be convinced to stay. There was something sacred in her loneliness now. Not emptiness, but space. Space for clarity, for peace, for watching snow fall without aching for someone else's hand to hold. She was holding her own hand now, and for the first time, that felt like enough. She wore her red scarf each Sunday, not because it reminded her of him, but because it reminded her of who she was when she wore it the first time. Hopeful, soft, and open. She was still those things, but now she was also steady, and no longer afraid to walk alone. The town's Christmas fair approached. She baked cookies for the children, set up lanterns in the town square, hung garlands with gloved hands and a calm heart. There was joy in the details now, not a distraction, but a declaration. I'm still capable of joy, even here, even now. And on Christmas Eve, as the church bells rang, Emily stood on the back steps of the community hall, watching snow fall in the stillness. She didn't make a wish. She didn't look back. She simply breathed in the cold air and whispered, "Thank you, God, for letting me stay." This was not a chapter about waiting for someone to return. It was a chapter about becoming someone who didn't need to. Emily had stayed, not because she had no place to go, but because this was where she learned how to rise. And maybe, someday, if he returned, he would find her, not waiting, but standing. Success didn't come to David overnight. It arrived in stages, shiny, seductive, and relentless. Every win added another layer to the life he believed he wanted. A new office, a new car, Another conference, another award. People shook his hand like it meant something. His name appeared in articles, and for a while it worked. He felt untouchable. He moved through boardrooms with ease, closing deals with that signature mix of confidence and calculation. Colleagues called him brilliant. Investors called him irreplaceable. He wore those words like armor, and underneath it all, he didn't notice how hollow it had begun to feel. The apartment he chose had floor-to-ceiling windows. The view overlooked a skyline that pulsed with ambition. He told himself that this was what he always dreamed of. Silence, space, freedom, glass and concrete, success. But late at night, those windows didn't reflect pride. They reflected someone alone in the dark. Someone who couldn't remember the last time he laughed with his whole face. His phone never stopped buzzing, calendar packed, travel booked, champagne flutes, rooftop views, deals inked in gold. But something small kept tugging at him. A smell, a song, the way a woman said home in a commercial. It always took him back, not to a place, but to a person. Emily's absence grew louder the more successful he became. He didn't understand why at first. He'd left. He chose this. He won. But in every celebration, her name sat unspoken in the corner of his mind, like a ghost who didn't haunt, only waited. Not to be remembered, but to be replaced. And yet she never was. He dated, of course. Women who wore ambition like perfume. Stylish, sharp, effortless. They asked about his portfolio, not his past. They were impressed, and easily bored. None of them looked at him like Emily did. None of them ever saw beneath the surface, and he stopped offering anything deeper. There were moments when he caught himself lying, smiling at parties, saying he was doing great, telling stories about his wins, while hiding how numb he felt waking up every day. But the lie didn't bother him. What bothered him was how easy it had become to pretend, to perform, to drift. One night, after a major pitch that earned standing ovation, David walked into his hotel suite and sat on the edge of the bed, still in his suit, tie still knotted. The applause was still ringing in his ears, and he suddenly wanted to scream. Not because of failure, but because none of it mattered. He reached for his phone and typed her name, Emily, paused, stared at the letters like they were foreign, then deleted the message before writing anything. He told himself she wouldn't want to hear from him, but the truth was, he didn't know what he'd even say. He started drinking more. Not recklessly, just enough to blur the edges. It helped him sleep. It helped him forget. It helped him avoid mirrors. And when he did catch his reflection, he saw a man who looked like success and felt like regret. There was a time when he believed he left for greatness. Now he wasn't sure he even knew what that word meant. He had everything: money, recognition, power, but no one to share it with, no one to see him. And when he was sick, no one noticed. That loneliness became a kind of sickness on its own. He returned to his hometown once, quietly, without telling anyone. He didn't go into town. He just parked on the hill and looked down at the lights. They still blinked warm and soft, so unlike the cold shimmer of the city. He stayed for 10 minutes, then left. He wasn't ready. He started avoiding holidays altogether. Christmas became just another day to work through. He booked flights, attended parties, made appearances. But every December, his chest grew tight. He'd walk past decorated trees in lobbies and think of Emily's small living room and the smell of cinnamon. He hated that memory most, because it felt like peace. His team started noticing the change. He was quieter, sharper, less patient, more tired. He chalked it up to stress. But deep down, he knew what was eating him. The slow ache of becoming someone he didn't admire. Then came the fall. A deal collapsed, one that carried too much weight. Investors pulled out. Rumors spread. The foundation cracked. He tried to hold it together, worked longer, spoke louder, smiled harder. But the machine no longer listened to the man who built it. His name faded faster than it rose. Emails stopped. Invitations stopped. People stopped calling back. He lost money, But more than that, he lost meaning. He sat alone in the same high-rise that once made him feel powerful and whispered the words he once promised he'd never need to say again. I wish I hadn't left. One morning he stood in the mirror, unshaven, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, and truly saw himself. And it terrified him, because for the first time in years he looked like the boy who never learned how to stay. And all he wanted was to go home. Not to reclaim, not to impress, not to fix everything, but to begin again, humbly, quietly, painfully. He packed a single bag, and with nothing left to prove, he headed toward the one place that still carried the sound of her name. The fall didn't come like a storm. There was no dramatic crash, no front-page scandal. Just silence, the kind that starts at the edges and slowly devours the center. A deal gone cold. An investor pulling out without explanation. A door that used to open, now locked without notice. At first, David thought it was a fluke. He had weathered setbacks before. He tightened the ship, doubled his hours, took control. But this time something was different. The phone calls didn't come back. The smiles at meetings felt forced. His voice no longer filled the room, it just echoed in it. Clients moved on. Colleagues stopped responding. One partner, then another, then three. Reputation is like ice in winter. One crack and it begins to fracture beneath your feet. And David? He was standing in the middle trying to pretend he could still walk on it. He started bleeding money. Fast. The apartment, the staff, the branding machine he'd built, all of it demanded to be fed. And he had nothing left to give it. He tried selling things quietly. But even silence costs more when you're used to being seen. Worse than the financial collapse was the shame. The kind that doesn't come with headlines, but with isolation. The nods turned into glances. The invitations vanished. He became a ghost in his own empire. And the man who once walked with pride now sat in silence with his head in his hands. He avoided mirrors. Even walking past reflective windows made his chest tighten. He didn't recognize the man he had become. And yet this was probably the first time he had truly seen himself. No spotlight, no applause, no projection. Just a man who chased everything and lost the one thing that could have made it mean something. There were nights when the silence screamed. He'd sit in the dark with the city lights blinking outside, remembering things he tried so hard to forget. Emily's laugh echoing in a kitchen filled with cinnamon. Her quiet strength, her steady presence. The way she never once asked him to be anything but real. He reached for his phone again, typed her name, paused, typed nothing. What could he say? Sorry, I thought the world was more valuable than your love. He deleted it, again. David stopped going out. The suits stayed in the closet. The fridge sat empty. He lived on black coffee and guilt, watching snow fall from a window he could no longer afford. And in that deep, wordless place, he whispered her name and didn't expect an answer. He began to hear God again, not in sermons, but in stillness. In the quiet places that success had drowned, he remembered the prayers of his youth, the moments of clarity before ego. He got down on his knees in a room full of broken things and said words he hadn't said in years. I can't do this anymore. There was no flash of light, no sudden miracle, just a breath, a peace that felt like the faint warmth of a candle in a room that had been cold for far too long. And with that flicker of warmth came a decision, not a grand plan, not a strategy to win her back, just a single honest step. He would go back, not to reclaim, not to justify, but to face the truth, whatever it cost. He packed one bag, no suit, no laptop, no leather planner, just warm clothes, a worn Bible, and the scarf Emily once gave him, the one he never wore after he left. It still smelled like her, like a life that had been real. He didn't tell anyone. No staff, no farewell posts. He simply left, the same way he once left her. But this time, the leaving wasn't about pride. It was about repentance. It was about returning empty-handed, on purpose. The train moved slowly through snow-covered fields. He watched small towns pass by, wondering if any of them knew what it was like to carry both success and sorrow in the same chest. He didn't expect forgiveness, didn't expect a smile. He just wanted to face what he ran from. When he stepped off the platform, the cold slapped him like a memory. The smell of pine, the hum of Christmas lights. Everything was smaller, but his heart had never felt heavier. He was no longer returning to a place. He was returning to a consequence. He didn't go straight to her. He walked through the town like a stranger, seeing familiar faces that didn't recognize him anymore. He passed the cafe where she once laughed, the park bench they once sat on in October light. It was all still here, but he wasn't sure he still belonged. And yet, he stayed, because this was the only honest place left. The fall didn't destroy him, it stripped him. And now, broken but breathing, David stood in the snow, hoping that redemption begins where pride ends. The snow kept falling outside, blanketing the small town in white, while inside the community hall warmth buzzed with laughter, the scent of cinnamon and distant carols. Emily stood near a table of hand-wrapped gifts, her fingers brushing over a red ribbon as she listened to the children rehearse a Christmas song. She wasn't just watching, she was holding together a space that had become her own sanctuary. Her peace wasn't loud. It was woven into every small act, every gentle smile, every quiet word that healed someone else's pain. David watched her from the doorway, leaning against the frame as his breath caught in his throat. She was glowing, not in the artificial, polished way he remembered from the past, but in a quiet, grounded light that came from someone who had fought hard for inner peace. She hadn't seen him yet, and he didn't dare step inside. His feet felt too heavy with guilt. His hands, once used to sign contracts and close deals, now trembled at the thought of reaching out and being rejected. She deserved better. She had always deserved more than what he gave. When Emily finally turned and noticed him, her expression didn't crumble. But it didn't soften either. Her eyes held questions, not anger. A silence stretched between them, filled with years that couldn't be undone, with apologies that still hadn't found words. David stepped forward slowly, as if approaching a fragile painting he didn't want to ruin. "Hi," he said, his voice lower than usual. She nodded, lips pressed together. She didn't run, but she didn't smile. That alone was mercy. "I didn't expect you here," Emily said, adjusting the corner of a gift box as if keeping her hands busy would keep her heart steady. David looked around, taking in the decorations, the children, the joy, none of which he'd been a part of. "I almost didn't come," he admitted, "but I couldn't stay away anymore. Not after everything I've remembered and realized." Emily's brow arched slightly. "Realized?" she echoed, not helping him but not stopping him either. He deserved to struggle. Healing had never come easy for either of them. He walked closer now, still unsure if he had the right. "I was proud," he confessed, eyes flicking downward. "I left because I thought success meant more than roots, more than love, more than you." Emily's silence echoed louder than any reply. Her arms were folded, not in anger, but as if protecting something fragile. Maybe it was her heart. Maybe it was her hard-earned peace. Either way, David didn't blame her. He admired her. That was new. That was different. That was the beginning of humility. "I don't expect anything," David added. "I just wanted to say this to your face before Christmas. I needed you to know that I regret leaving, and that I see now everything I missed." Emily tilted her head, her gaze steady and clear. "And what do you expect from telling me this?" she asked. David hesitated. "Nothing. I don't expect anything. But I hope, maybe, one day, you'll believe I've changed." Emily didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. "We'll see. If you're still here after the season ends. If your words become actions." The town choir began to rehearse again, voices rising with imperfect harmony, and David stepped aside to let her pass. She walked by him without a word, but her shoulder brushed his gently. It was deliberate, not an embrace, not forgiveness, but something small, something true. He stood still, letting the weight of that gesture anchor him. Sometimes silence wasn't cold. It was sacred space, and he wasn't going to ruin it by rushing. That night, David returned to the inn instead of leaving town. He sat by the fireplace, a notebook in his lap, and began to write. Not business plans, not excuses, but memories, regrets, apologies never said, promises he now understood needed time to be proven. The fire crackled as he stared at the blank page, thinking of the woman who once loved him and the version of himself he had to become. Not to win her back, but to become a man worthy of forgiveness. Emily, meanwhile, tucked in the last of the children from the Christmas choir. She watched their dreams take shape under fairy lights and paper stars. She had no room in her heart for fantasy anymore, but she believed in change, in slow, real, grounded change. She had seen it in others. Maybe, just maybe, David was capable too. But she wouldn't gamble her heart again for a man who only knew how to talk. This time, she needed to see him walk it out. In the following days, David didn't crowd her. He helped with boxes, repaired old shelves, picked up food donations. He greeted everyone with respect. No fanfare, no look-at-me energy, just service. People in the town noticed. Emily noticed too, but she said nothing. Not yet. Let actions speak. Let presence rewrite the absence he left behind. Christmas had a strange way of bringing what was buried to the surface and testing if the ground was ready to grow again. One morning, Emily arrived early at the hall and found the sidewalk already cleared of snow. A small note was taped to the door. I know I can't undo the past, but I can shovel your path forward. D. She smiled despite herself. It wasn't much, but it was honest. And it didn't ask anything in return. That mattered more than flowers or speeches. It was consistency that healed old wounds. And this was the beginning of something unfamiliar. Hope. David wasn't pretending to be someone else. For the first time in years, he wasn't performing. He was present. When no one was watching, he was still helping. When praised, he simply nodded. He didn't talk about his past. He listened to others. He didn't try to impress Emily's friends. He served them cocoa. In his silence, he was becoming someone new. And Emily could feel it. Not with her heart, but with her instincts, which had learned how to spot the difference between charm and change. By the time the town began putting up the Christmas Eve stage, the snow was heavier and the lights brighter. David was there, climbing ladders, laughing softly with teenagers, tying garlands with careful precision. Emily watched from across the street, arms crossed, coat pulled tight. He wasn't looking for her gaze. He wasn't chasing anything. He was just there. And somehow that felt more romantic than a bouquet of roses. When they crossed paths again that night, David simply offered her a mug of tea. You looked cold, he said, and turned to leave. No pressure, no long speech, just warmth, both literal and emotional. Emily took the mug and held it, feeling the contrast of heat in her hands and uncertainty in her heart. She didn't call after him, but she whispered, "Thank you," into the night air, and David heard it. He always had good ears. He just never used them before. Later, as she closed up the hall, Emily lingered by the tree they had all decorated. She touched one ornament, a snowflake her mother had given her, and breathed in the quiet. Somewhere outside, David was walking home, alone, not as punishment, but because some journeys had to be walked without shortcuts. She respected that. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew who she was now. And she would never again settle for anything less than love that walked in truth. David returned to the inn and sat again by the fire. The notebook was fuller now, pages scribbled with prayers, memories, and names of people he wanted to thank. He wrote Emily's name last, not in bold, but in careful, reverent handwriting. He didn't know if she'd ever read it, but it mattered that he wrote it, just like it mattered that he was still here. The snow outside grew thicker, blanketing everything with silence. And in that stillness, David finally felt peace. Not because things were fixed, but because for the first time he wasn't trying to control the outcome. He was learning to be present in the mess, in the waiting, in the quiet. That was his gift this Christmas. Not reconciliation yet, but transformation. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Across town, Emily pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, looked out at the stars, and whispered to the night, "Let him be real." And somewhere, without knowing it, David whispered back, "Let me be enough." The snow began falling heavier that afternoon, blanketing the small town in white, as if the heavens themselves were trying to quiet every noise, every doubt, every regret. David stood in the alley behind the community center, hands buried in his coat pockets, breath visible in the cold, staring at the window where Emily and the children prepared Christmas cards. He wasn't sure how long he'd been watching her, how she smiled softly, patiently helping a girl adjust her ribbon, laughing gently with a boy who offered her a crooked snowflake. She looked content, not like someone who needed anything from him. Emily sensed something before she saw him. A strange stillness outside the window made her turn, and for a fleeting second their eyes locked through the glass. David didn't look away, and neither did she. There was no wave, no smile, just silence. But it said everything. It wasn't about past wounds now. It was about what lingered, what remained unresolved. The air between them held years of unfinished sentences and missed Christmases. And maybe it was time to speak. Later that evening, after everyone left, Emily found him still outside, leaning against the brick wall covered in snow. "You're going to freeze out here," she said, her voice low, unsure if she was offering concern or drawing a boundary. "I've stood in colder places," he answered, eyes fixed ahead. None of them felt as empty as this. The words weren't meant to guilt her. They were just truth. Heavy, quiet truth that settled between them like fresh snow. "I didn't come back for pity," he said, finally turning to face her. "I came back because I ran out of excuses not to. For everything. For you. For me." Emily crossed her arms, but not defensively, just to hold herself steady. "David, people don't just leave and come back when it suits them." His face flinched, not from the cold, but from her accuracy. "I know," he whispered. "I know that now." There was something in the way he looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. Not the girl he left behind, but the woman she had become. Strong, kind, steady. "You didn't wait for me," he said, almost like a question. She shook her head. "I didn't. I built something from the silence you left." Her voice didn't carry anger, only fact. "And I'm proud of what I became without you." David looked down, his eyes glinting with both pride and shame. "You should be." He cleared his throat. "I wasn't the man you deserved. I thought I had to prove something out there, that success would make me matter more. But nothing ever felt enough, until I lost everything. And even then, the only thing I wanted to run back to was the version of myself I had when I was with you." His voice cracked and he let it. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She stood in the falling snow, watching the man who once walked away now come undone in front of her. "Words don't fix everything, David," she said gently. "But presence, that speaks louder." He stepped forward cautiously, as if afraid he might break her all over again. "Then let me start with presence," he said. "Let me just be near. Help. Listen. Stay." It would have been easy to send him away, to protect herself from the vulnerability of letting him near again. But something about the way he stood there, unguarded, stripped of pride, made her see a different man, not perfect, but trying. "You can help clean the kitchen," she said, turning back toward the center. It was small, but it was something, a step. He followed her in silence, and for once, silence felt safe. Inside, the scent of cinnamon and pine clung to the air. They worked in quiet rhythm, David drying dishes, Emily wiping counters. There was a simplicity to it that neither had felt in years, being side by side, not demanding anything, not rushing forgiveness, just doing life, quietly, gently, together. A paper star fell from the shelf and they both reached for it at the same time. Their hands touched. They froze. Neither pulled away. "I still remember how you used to fold these," David said, voice low. "You made hundreds that year we couldn't afford real decorations." Emily smiled, surprised he remembered. We made do with paper and prayers. He nodded, eyes soft. And you made it feel like Christmas anyway. For a moment, they weren't strangers rediscovering trust. They were two souls remembering why they ever mattered to each other. Why didn't you ever call? She asked suddenly. Not bitterly, but because the question had always lived inside her. After that Christmas, David looked down at the floor, fingers tightening around the towel. Because I didn't think I deserved your voice. I thought if I stayed silent long enough, you'd forget me. And then it wouldn't hurt so much. Her breath caught. It hurt anyway. He nodded slowly. I know. Then almost to himself, I lived in big cities, but I never felt seen. I earned respect, but never peace. I had money, but never joy. His gaze met hers. You were the only place that ever felt like home, Emily. And I traded it for applause I couldn't even hear. The honesty was heavy. But it was real. And Emily, strong as she was, felt the weight of it too. They sat in the old wooden chairs by the window, the lights of the town square twinkling outside. I don't know what you want from me, she whispered. I'm not the girl you left. David leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I don't want her. I want you. The woman who stood when I ran. The woman who chose to become more instead of growing bitter. The woman who still helps everyone else even when she's tired. That's who I came back for. Emily looked at him, and for the first time she didn't see the boy who walked away. She saw the man learning to stay. Maybe he wouldn't say all the right things. Maybe healing would take time. But for the first time in years, she felt that this wasn't just a return. It was a beginning. A new kind. One that didn't erase the past, but built from it. You're going to have to show up, she said. Not just this week. Not just for Christmas. Always. David's expression grew serious. I want to. Not as some grand gesture, but in the ordinary. In dishes and cold nights and listening even when it's uncomfortable. She smiled softly. Then we'll start with tonight. One small step. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something thawed. Not quite love. Not yet. But hope. And that was more than either of them had dared to ask for just weeks before. David didn't try to hold her hand again. Emily didn't lean into him. But their chairs stayed close. Their breathing found rhythm. And in that quiet, unremarkable room, something sacred began to grow. The past wasn't erased, but it was no longer the only thing in the room. What stood between them now was a fragile bridge built not of apologies, but of presence. Real, intentional, vulnerable presence. And sometimes that's what redemption looks like. Not fireworks, not declarations, but two people willing to be in the same room again, with nothing but honesty and open hearts. As they stood to leave, David turned off the lights, leaving just the soft glow of the tree. Emily watched him. He turned back. Good night, Emily. She held his gaze. Good night, David. They walked into the snow side by side, saying nothing else. But in the hush of winter, and the hush of hearts beginning to open again, no words were needed. David stood alone outside the church where the charity event would be hosted the next day. Snow fell gently around him, resting on the shoulders of his coat, like silent reminders of time lost. He stared at the entrance, recalling the times he and Emily had walked through that door hand in hand. Now everything had changed. He was no longer the man she once loved, but neither was she the girl he had left behind. There was strength in her now, gentle but unshakable. And he, for the first time in years, felt like a man who needed to earn his place again. Inside the hall, Emily was arranging final decorations with Lily and a group of volunteers. The laughter of children echoed, and the warm light from the tree flickered against the walls. But as she glanced toward the door and saw David hesitate outside, her hands paused mid-action. Something inside her stirred, a familiar ache, a memory of who he used to be, and who he might still become. But trust doesn't grow back like a tree in spring. It takes water, and light, and time. She turned her gaze away and focused back on Lily's giggle. Later that night, Emily sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea in her hands. The glow of the flames reflected in her eyes as she thought about the past few weeks. David's presence stirred everything she had worked so hard to quiet. He was no longer cruel or arrogant, but something softer, wounded perhaps. And yet, the scars he left behind hadn't disappeared just because he showed up with apologies in his eyes. Healing wasn't about him anymore. It was about her, and the peace she had built without him. David, meanwhile, sat in his parked car outside his childhood home. The inside was cold, but his thoughts were burning. He saw flashes of his past selfishness, the words he should have said, the pride that destroyed everything. He had come back hoping to fix things, but every interaction with Emily reminded him that he wasn't entitled to forgiveness. He would have to earn it, day by day, without expectations. Not for the ending he wanted, but because it was the right thing to do. The next morning, the church was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of hot cocoa. Children ran through aisles with handmade ornaments, and David watched from a distance as Emily led the choir rehearsal. She looked radiant, not because of what she wore, but because of who she had become. She was loved in that town, respected, needed. And for the first time, David felt like the outsider in a world that used to be his. During a break, Lily approached him holding a candy cane. "Are you going to sing too?" she asked with innocent curiosity. David crouched beside her and smiled. "Only if I get to stand next to you and your mom." Lily grinned and nodded. In that moment, something simple and sacred happened. David felt welcome, not by right, but by grace. He hadn't earned it, but that didn't mean he couldn't honor it. Emily saw the interaction from afar and felt her heart tighten. She wasn't ready to love him again, but she also couldn't deny the way he looked at Lily, with patience, with softness, with the kind of presence that was missing before. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what kind of man he was becoming, not for her, but for the child. That mattered more than pride or pain. As the final performance began, David stood in the back of the room, holding a candle like everyone else. The children's voices filled the air with silent night, and Emily's voice harmonized above the crowd. The room glowed with warmth, not just from lights, but from the spirit of something deeper: forgiveness, peace, and presence. David closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he prayed, not for a second chance, but for the courage to stay and become someone worthy of one. After the event, as people gathered for cookies and cider, Emily found herself walking toward him. The crowd faded in her periphery as she stood before the man who once walked away from her, and who now stood quietly waiting, not demanding, not begging, just there. "You were good with Lily," she said softly. David looked up, surprised by the kindness in her tone. "I'm trying," he whispered. She nodded slowly. "I can see that. And I need you to know something. I'm not the same woman you left." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I wouldn't want you to be. She deserved better. You deserve better." There was silence, thick with everything they couldn't say yet. But silence wasn't always empty. Sometimes it held the very things words would ruin. David reached into his coat and pulled out a small, old ornament, faded gold, a chipped star. "You gave this to me once," he said. "I kept it, even when I didn't deserve to." Emily stared at it, a flood of memories behind her eyes. "It was from the year we said we'd start over," she murmured. "Funny how life gives us one more shot, when we least expect it." Lily tugged on Emily's sleeve. "Mom, can he walk us home?" Emily looked at David, then back at her daughter. "If he wants to," she said gently. David nodded. "I'd be honored." And just like that, the three of them stepped out into the snowy night. No grand speeches, no promises, just small steps. Quiet ones. The kind that mattered most. As they walked down the street, David stayed a step behind, watching the two people who had unknowingly saved him. He thought about how he used to rush through life, always seeking success, always trying to prove something. But now, each crunch of snow beneath his boots felt like a sacred sound. He was learning to walk slowly, to notice, to stay. They reached Emily's porch. Lights twinkled on the railing, and the scent of cinnamon drifted from inside. Emily turned to face him. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said. "Thank you for showing up, and staying calm. David's eyes softened. Thank you for letting me witness who you've become. You didn't need me to become her, but I'm honored to meet her now. Emily hesitated, then reached for his hand. Just briefly. Just enough. This doesn't mean everything's fixed, she whispered. It just means I'm not closing the door. David nodded. That's more than I deserve, and everything I hoped for. He stepped back, giving her space, his heart full, not with expectation, but with reverence. As she went inside and closed the door softly behind her, David remained on the porch for a moment, staring at the stars above. They looked clearer tonight, brighter. He took a deep breath and exhaled into the cold air. There was no rush, no ending to chase, just the beginning of something real. Back inside, Emily watched from the window as he walked away slowly into the snow, not storming off, not vanishing, just walking like a man who had finally learned how to stay. Even in leaving, she whispered a silent prayer, not for romance or fairy tales, but for healing. For both of them. That night, as snow blanketed the town, two hearts lay quietly awake under different roofs, no longer strangers to pain, no longer chained to the past. Not lovers yet, but something deeper. Two souls slowly learning that love isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the courage to show up, and keep showing up, one snowy night at a time. The snow had returned that morning, covering the streets in a quiet, almost sacred silence. Emily stood by the window of the community center, watching volunteers prepare for the Christmas dinner. Her heart felt lighter, freer, yet filled with uncertainty about what came next. David had not made any grand promises, no declarations of love, just small, real steps. And somehow that felt more meaningful than anything. Still, she wondered if broken things could truly be made whole again. If this time, love would come with roots deep enough to survive. David arrived early, carrying boxes of food and supplies, wearing a worn coat and hopeful eyes. The other volunteers welcomed him without fanfare, but Emily noticed the way he moved. Intentional, humble, present. As he placed the food on the tables, he glanced at her. Their eyes met, and for the first time she didn't look away. There was no anger left in her gaze, just a softness that scared him more than hatred ever did. It meant she still cared. And that terrified him, because it meant he could still lose her. Later that afternoon, as children gathered for the nativity play, a small boy tripped and burst into tears. David rushed over, kneeling in the snow to comfort him, wiping the child's tears gently with his sleeve. Emily watched the scene unfold from a distance, her eyes moistening. She wasn't watching David the CEO or the man who had broken her heart. She was watching a man who had chosen to show up, who had chosen tenderness, and her heart, despite the years, still recognized him. After the dinner, with the room buzzing in laughter and the smell of cinnamon lingering in the air, David approached her. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded, and they stepped outside into the softly falling snow. The Christmas lights from the gazebo cast a warm glow over their faces. They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the hush of December. "I don't expect anything," he finally said. "I just needed you to know I came back not to fix the past, but to be part of the future if you'll let me." Emily looked at him, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and longing. "You hurt me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "And I still carry that." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I know, and I'll carry it with you for as long as it takes." Her eyes filled with tears, not because of pain, but because she finally felt seen. Not for the perfect version he once imagined, but for who she truly was now. And he wasn't running this time. He was staying, quietly, fully. They stood like that under the snow, two hearts thawing in the hush of winter. "What changed you?" she asked softly. David let out a breath. "Losing everything made me realize what I never truly had. Peace. And the only time I ever felt close to it was you." Emily closed her eyes, letting his words settle like snowflakes on her skin. "You don't have to say more," she said, "but you do have to keep showing up." He smiled. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a fragile beginning. That night, As the last guests left and the lanterns flickered low, David stayed behind to clean. He washed dishes, folded chairs, swept the floor, all without being asked. Emily watched from the hallway, silent and moved. She realized something important. Love wasn't proven in grand gestures, but in quiet consistency, in the willingness to stay for the mess. And David, once proud and distant, was now the man on his knees, wiping tables and rebuilding trust, one act at a time. Before leaving, David placed a small gift under the tree. He didn't hand it to her. He simply left it there, wrapped in brown paper, tied with red ribbon. Curious, Emily picked it up after he was gone. Inside, she found a copy of a poem she once loved, one she had read to him years ago. It was handwritten, worn, and signed at the bottom. "I'm learning how to listen now, David." She pressed it to her chest, overcome by the kind of ache that held both sorrow and hope. The next morning, Emily walked through the town square just as the sun began to rise. Snowflakes danced in the light, and the world felt quiet, as if holding its breath. She found David sitting alone on the bench near the frozen fountain, thermos in hand, waiting. "You came back," she said softly. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "I never stopped wanting to." She sat beside him, neither of them speaking for a while. Silence had never felt this safe before. David reached into his coat and pulled out a small piece of paper, an old photo of them at a Christmas fundraiser years ago. "I kept this," he said, "every year, even when I tried to forget. You were laughing in this picture, and I was too. That version of me didn't deserve you then, but maybe this one can learn to." Emily looked at the photo, then at him. His face had changed. Softer now, less polished, more real. "Maybe we both can," she replied. The church bells began to ring in the distance, their sound soft and melodic against the morning hush. "Do you believe people can change?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. Emily thought for a long moment, then said, "I believe people can choose differently, and that changes everything." He smiled, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Then I choose you. This time, I choose to stay." She took his hand. "Let's walk slowly, okay?" "Slow is good," he whispered. They walked together through the quiet streets of the town, past garlands and wreaths, past memories and regrets. It wasn't a perfect ending. It was a beginning, raw, real, and shaped by grace. The kind of story Christmas was made for. One of redemption not through perfection but through presence. Of coming home not to a place, but to a person. Emily looked up at him, and in her eyes was the softest yes he'd ever known. That night, as the stars blinked above the snow-covered town, Emily sat on her porch with a cup of cocoa. A gentle knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find David holding a string of lights and a shy smile. "Thought your porch could use a little more sparkle," he said. She laughed, then stepped aside to let him in. They hung lights, shared silence, and stood close beneath the warm glow. There was no rush, only this moment. Eventually, the lights twinkled above them, soft and golden. David turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I used to think strength was never needing anyone," he said. "But I was wrong. Real strength is staying, loving through the fear. And I want to be that kind of strong, with you." Emily nodded, eyes shimmering. "Then start now." And she leaned in, letting years of distance fall away into the quiet warmth between them. Their kiss was not rushed. It was reverent, full of memory and trembling hope. As snow fell gently around them, they stood wrapped in light and second chances. Not everything was fixed. Not everything would be easy. But they had this, a new chapter, a story being rewritten with every small act of courage. With every morning he showed up, and every night she chose to believe. In the distance, the town's nativity scene glowed beside the church. The baby in the manger, the light in the dark. Emily rested her head on David's shoulder. "Merry Christmas," he whispered. "Merry Redemption," she replied. And somewhere deep within them, something shifted. A wound closed, a door opened, and love, imperfect, fragile, stubborn love, decided to stay. The next day, the town's newspaper featured a photo of the community Christmas dinner. In the background, David was seen serving cocoa, Emily smiling by his side. No headlines, no grand stories. Just a quiet witness to the miracle of return, of presence, of two people who chose grace. And beneath the photo, handwritten in ink, was a simple phrase: he came back. And this time, he stayed. And that, perhaps, was the greatest miracle of all. Not that he returned, but that he learned how to remain, that she found the strength to forgive, that Christmas gave them what the years had taken: hope, slow and steady. Because sometimes it's not about the things we fix, it's about the hearts we choose to hold, day after day. And as the snow kept falling softly, their story finally began again. Snow continued to fall softly outside the church window, but inside, the world had shifted forever. Emily stood at the edge of the altar, her hand still warm from David's. It wasn't just a reunion. It was the resurrection of two hearts that had once been shattered. The small town whispers faded, and all that remained was the truth between them. A truth built on scars, honesty, and the fragile courage of trying again. Christmas had brought more than lights and nostalgia this year. It had brought healing. And in the stillness of that moment, Emily finally felt peace. David's eyes didn't leave her as they walked out together, the bells chiming faintly behind them. For so long, he had thought he didn't deserve another chance. But here she was, his second chance, wrapped in strength, kindness, and the fire of a woman who refused to stay broken. His fingers tightened slightly around hers as they stepped into the cold. "This time," he whispered, "I don't intend to walk away." She didn't reply immediately. Her smile said enough. Some promises don't need words, just presence. As they passed through the town square, memories wrapped around them like snowflakes. The coffee shop where he used to wait for her. The bench where they'd argued one December night that changed everything. And now, these places would carry new memories. Not of perfection, but of redemption. A quiet kind of love had grown between them. The kind that doesn't rush or demand, but remains. Emily looked up and said, "Let's rebuild." Slowly, David nodded, brick by brick. And this time together. Days passed and the town's rhythm returned. Gingerbread sales, carol rehearsals, laughter echoing through the snowy streets. But something had changed. People noticed how David stayed longer after church, how he helped stack chairs, how he lingered near Emily but gave her space. Trust, he knew, wouldn't be given quickly, but he was willing to earn it. And in every quiet gesture, he was writing his apology in action, not words. Emily, too, was learning to trust again. Not just him, but herself. Her laughter returned, softer at first, then fuller. She reopened the community kitchen with more joy than fear, and when David showed up with groceries instead of excuses, she allowed herself to hope. Healing, she had learned, isn't a straight line. It's messy, but it's holy work. And Christmas was the perfect time to begin that work again. On Christmas Eve, the town gathered for the candlelight service. Emily stood in the front row, not leading, just listening. As the candles flickered and the children sang, she felt something new take root inside her. Not just forgiveness, but freedom. David arrived late, as always, but he came, and that mattered more than perfect timing. Their eyes met across the pews, and in that glance she saw it all: remorse, love, and the ache of becoming. After the service, he waited outside with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. No big speeches, no grand declarations, just warmth. "You waited," she said, stepping into the snow. "I would have waited the rest of my life," he replied, voice thick. And for the first time in years, she let him hold her hand in front of everyone, not to make a point, but to feel real again. They walked together toward the small inn where she now worked part-time. It wasn't lavish, but it was hers. She paused near the nativity scene out front. "I used to think broken stories didn't belong in the light," she said softly. "But maybe that's exactly where they're supposed to be." David knelt beside her, his breath clouding in the cold. "You brought me back to the light." She didn't argue. She didn't have to. Inside the inn, the Christmas tree glowed with quiet grace. The guests had gone to sleep. It was just them now. Two people who had once lost everything. Two people who now stood in the glow of another chance. David took a small wrapped box from his coat. "It's not a ring," he said quickly. "Not yet. It's just a key to the house. The one I built for you before I walked away. I kept it all this time, in case one day you came back." Her breath caught, not because of the gift, but because of the meaning behind it. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't asking for answers. He was simply opening a door. She looked at the key, then at him. "Let's go see it. Not tonight, but one day." He nodded, eyes shimmering. "Whenever you're ready, I'll be there." Outside, the snow had stopped and the stars blinked through the clouds like blessings. Emily leaned into him. Not fully, not finally, but willingly. "You broke me once," she said gently, "but I broke too. We both had pieces to gather." He looked down, pain and gratitude warring in his expression. "And now?" "Now," she whispered, "we gather them together." That Christmas, they didn't exchange expensive gifts or take staged photos. They exchanged something far more sacred. Presence. A kind of holy nearness that couldn't be wrapped or posted online. A kind of love that had failed once but refused to stay buried. Love reborn, like the season itself. Full of light, risk, and the quiet courage to stay. The next morning, David helped serve breakfast at the community kitchen. No suits, no name tags, just sleeves rolled up and flour on his shirt. The town watched in quiet awe. This man who had once been too proud to stay now stood beside the woman he once left, not above her. Emily passed him the cinnamon rolls. Their hands brushed. She smiled. So did he. The kitchen smelled like mercy. Weeks turned into months. And while their story still had hard days, one thing remained true. They didn't give up. Not on each other. Not on the version of love that chooses presence over performance. Emily rebuilt her routines with him by her side. David began to mentor other men in the community. Brokenness, he had learned, wasn't a weakness. It was an invitation to become whole. Spring arrived slowly. Snow turned to mud, then to blooms. And with it, something else blossomed. Hope. Not the naive kind, the hard-earned kind. The kind born in pain, tested in silence, and kept alive by choice. David and Emily weren't perfect, but they were becoming. And in every ordinary moment, they built something extraordinary. One evening, as they walked through the town square, now green and alive, he stopped her. "Next Christmas," he said, "would you come home? Not for a season, but for good." Emily didn't answer right away. She reached into her coat and pulled out the key. "I never gave this back," she said, "because maybe I never stopped hoping." He pulled her close, forehead resting against hers. No music, no crowd, just the quiet beating of two hearts that had been torn apart and stitched back together by grace. "Let's write the rest of this story together," he whispered. "With all the messy chapters." "Especially the messy ones," she replied, her voice breaking into a smile. "They're the best part." And under the soft light of the Christmas star that still hung from the church tower, they kissed. Not the kind of kiss that ends a movie, but the kind that begins a life. A kiss born not from fantasy, but from redemption. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most powerful Christmas miracle of all.